blood, Pokemon, and just a little bit of semen. That's my pitch for one of the strangest YouTube series I've ever seen, and also my litmus test for new friends. Today we're going deep into one of the most fascinating experimental series on YouTube, Korney's Homunculus experiments. Over the course of 21 episodes, all filmed in Russian, this guy documents his attempts to recreate a medieval alchemical recipe, claiming to produce organisms that can evolve, merge, and even fight back. Oh yeah, also, before you ask, yes, obligatory, I watched all 21 episodes, so you don't have to. You're welcome. Please subscribe. Homunculus, or homunculi, aren't just something that Korney came up with. They're actually one of the oldest recorded obsessions in the history of human ambition. In the early 16th century, there lived a Swiss physician and alchemist named Paracelsus. Now, he wrote a whole menagerie of books and grimoires on his various experiments and findings, one of which was named De Natura Rerum, or Of the Nature of Things. This work contains a detailed, albeit fairly enigmatic, recipe for creating a homunculus. Let the semen of a man be putrefied by itself in a sealed cucurbit for 40 days with the highest degree of putrefaction in a horse's womb, or at least so long until it begins to live, move, and be agitated, which can easily be seen. After this time, it will look somewhat like a man, but transparent, without a body. If, after this, it be daily nourished and fed, prudently and cautiously, with the arcanum of human blood, and be kept for 40 weeks in the perpetual and equal heat of a horse's womb, it becomes thence a true and living infant, having the same limbs as any child born of a woman, but much smaller. The procedure is fairly involved. To start off, you'll have to place an amount of cum in a sealed container. Paracelsus uses a gourd for his experiments. You then need to leave it in a warm place for about 40 days. Paracelsus instructs us to cover it in warm horse manure, but Korney just wraps it in some warm cloths. So, I think I'd prefer the second method, instead of whatever that weirdo was doing. Shoving it in some doo-doo caca. Big P was going freak mode, I'll tell you what. After this period, the homunculus will appear as a small, semi-transparent humanoid creature. And then, as any new parent knows, comes the hard part. The homunculus must be stored in specific conditions for 40 weeks, and fed a diet of human blood, all while being kept at the same warmth as the gestation period. After that, it is supposed to become identical to any child, though much smaller. And then we have our homunculus, Latin for little man. This wasn't just idle fantasy for Paracelsus. He was a serious medical researcher for his time. He pioneered the use of chemicals in medicine, and also believed in alchemy, in the transmutation of matter, and in the idea that humans could understand life so completely that they could create it themselves. He lived in an era of spontaneous generation, the belief that life could arise from non-living matter, as long as certain conditions were met. People believed maggots spontaneously appeared from rotting meat, that frogs all emerged from mud, and that mice could be produced from wheat and dirty rags. I know this sounds pretty stupid now, especially by the metrics of modern science. But you have to remember, these people didn't have microscopes or germ theory, so this was the best explanation available. Life appeared to spring from nothing, all around you. So, with the right conditions, why couldn't you recreate that? Korney starts the series with a simple introduction in episode 0, where he explains his methodology and his thinking. He anticipates the objections a viewer might have while watching the series. And he addresses these by bringing up examples of real-life biology. He talks about mules as an example of hybridization, mitochondria as an example of ancient cellular mergers, about lichens, algae, and fungi that merge as symbiotic organisms and can behave as one. He's building up an argument that crossing life forms from wildly different species isn't necessarily impossible. It might be uncommon, sure. It might need intervention from man, but ultimately it's in the realm of plausibility. He caps this off by saying something that I believe is the key to the entire series. It would be naive to believe that science has known all of the laws of the biological world. And she knows everything, of course. This is not so. That's the worldview he'll be operating on throughout the entire series. He's not anti-science. Honestly, he does a lot to follow the scientific method. He just believes that science has simply missed something, and he's going to find it. Korney's method is very similar to Paracelsus's, but instead of gooning in some gourd, he's going to use an unfertilized chicken's egg. To do this, he drills a small hole into the egg and uses a syringe to inject his baby batter straight into the yolk. He then uses band-aids to seal the hole, wraps it in a beanie, and then stores it in a dark closet to incubate. After about 10 days, something emerges. It moves around a little, but it's pretty obvious that whatever this creature is, it's in poor condition, and it dies quickly. Korney points out that the plaster had darkened with infection. It had begun to rot, but reminds us that Paracelsus mentioned that a small amount of rotting is acceptable, but it should not be very intensive. A lesser man might look at this dying and rotting experiment and think, maybe I should stop. Maybe this isn't really working. But not Korney. No. He's thinking, let's scale up. And this pays off. On his 5th attempt, he actually succeeds. He cracks the egg open to see this weird, fleshy, jellyfish-looking thing. He picks it up with a pair of tweezers and inspects it a bit. The creature spits something at him and kind of freaks him out. So Korney does what any good scientist would do, and he smashes it with a book. He notes that this fluid could have been an acid due to the stains on his shirt, but he didn't really feel any burning. He leaves the episode off with a few discoveries. 1, homunculi can have different body shapes. And 2, some can produce and spit acid. So Korney's feeling pretty good about this. He sets a pretty lofty goal to produce 20 homunculi in batches. He plans on doing 4 groups of 5, staggered about 10 days apart. Which, I mean, kudos to him, but I can only imagine him coming out of that looking like one of those husbands from the trying for a baby TikToks. He wants to do this to observe different developmental stages simultaneously, aiming for industrial production. He makes one little error though, one small change. He uses store-bought eggs instead of farm fresh. Every single egg is empty. It's a complete failure. Obviously, the eggs are a big part of what went wrong. But Korney offers an additional theory. Paracelsus wrote that sperm should be properly mesmerized before use. Without ever explaining what that means, Korney interprets this as the process requires an actual intention, care, perhaps even emotion. By treating it like a factory, he thinks he just broke something essential. He begins with a new homunculus. 10 days old, similar to the acid spitter. Korney places it in water where it thrives. This little guy loves his new aquarium. He begins experimenting with different feeding methods. Sugar water, then protein powder, and then actual meat. A white, slimy goo appears across his body, dripping from his mouth. This eventually fades though, and little stripe-like markings begin to appear, similar to veins. Over the next few videos, the homunculus begins to grow and inherit new features. He gets a bit bigger and a little fatter around his base, and grows what seems to be a little pointed tongue out of his mouth. A viewer asks him, if this is a human and a bird hybrid, why doesn't it look like either? He responds by saying that he never really claimed that the homunculus is a hybrid, stating that it's still unknown how this organism actually arises. suggesting that it might more closely resemble primordial ocean organisms. Korney also discovers that this creature is very sensitive to different temperatures. In the humid summer heat, the homunculus went completely motionless. He assumed that it had died, but he put it into the refrigerator, and it was revived. A second homunculus enters the fray. This one is completely inert. No movement, no mouth. It just seems to sit there and absorb nutrients through its skin. Pretty boring altogether. Korney names this one Slowpoke. The original gets renamed Pikachu after a discovery he made while feeding. Between the tweezers and the water, a spark slipped. He measures electrical activity in the water and finds that the homunculus is generating electricity. In nature, there are animals possessing such a property. The electric eel, the electric catfish, they're even dangerous to people. But I hope that my homunculus isn't dangerous. He hopes, but for now he decides to keep them separated. Episode 8 is an interesting one. While being fed dissolved protein through the water, Slowpoke develops something new. Slowpoke now has a simple eye. Korney finds this surprising, noting that it actually contradicts one of his previous theories. He supposed that homunculi were supposed to resemble primitive ancient ocean organisms. So, an eye doesn't really fit, does it? Eyes are a relatively recent evolutionary development. They're pretty complex. In the next video, Korney decides to move both homunculi into a larger, shared aquarium in the hopes that they can grow bigger. For a while, nothing changes, and Slowpoke seems unbothered by Pikachu's electricity generation. But one day, when Korney comes home from work, he realizes that something had happened. Somehow, Pikachu had crawled across the tank and attached himself to a concerned-looking Slowpoke. Now, the obvious first instinct would be that Pikachu is trying to eat him, but Korney notes that whatever they're doing, it's a little too slow for predation. So he keeps an eye on them, and after about a day with no change, he reconsiders. So maybe he just came over to give him a little kiss. A little smooch-mooch on the forehead. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Korney thinks that this might be a form of mating with each other. But again, the process is taking too long, so it must be something different still. Next episode, these two still seem like they're eating each other. But Slowpoke seems to be winning. Who'da thunk, huh? But there are still a few indicators that this might be something more than consumption. Slowpoke's eye has disappeared, leaving only a little bump. Korney notes that this might be for its protection. Pikachu has lost his electrical ability and can no longer eat any meat. Korney decides to run a test. He takes a brush and touches Pikachu. And then he touches Slowpoke. They react together. This confirms my assumption. The nervous system in two organisms has merged. Probably the body will also produce a merger. I guess the body will be completely united. At this point, Pikachu has completely penetrated into Slowpoke, and the entry hole is gradually closing. Korney notes that this was a merger, rather than just a case of Slowpoke eating his brother, and he can tell due to a few signs. First, Slowpoke is significantly smaller, meaning that the merger was energy intensive. He also changed his shape, with the original lower outgrowths mostly gone. There's also a small hole on his side that appears to react to light, which seems to be the eye, just relocated. Korney calls this somatic hybridization. It's not eating, it's not reproduction, but actually a merger of two organisms into one. They share traits from both, but are identical to neither. He gives it a new name, Shoggoth. Shoggoths are creatures from H.P. Lovecraft's fiction. They're massive, protoplasmic, and capable of taking any form. I've encountered plenty of these in my days playing Call of Cthulhu, but I think it's pretty interesting that he named it this, as they have a history of rebelling against and destroying their creators. Now that the merger is complete, the homunculus begins showing off new features. It has developed a mouth with these tooth-like structures. Korney explains that there are 3 outgrowths in the base of the homunculus body, meaning that this creature has a 3-beam symmetry, which is only found in worms. But like any growing toddler, he's a picky eater. Korney tries feeding him vegetables and small pieces of meat, but there's really no reaction. Despite not eating, Korney is not all too worried and says, "Worms can starve for a long time without harming themselves. But it's going to have to eat eventually." Paracelsus wrote that homunculi should be fed a diet of milk and human blood. Korney is understandably not too enthusiastic about this, but the creature still won't eat. So he tries it. "I pierced my finger for blood to flow and plunged my finger into the aquarium. The homunculus was aroused. It liked the smell of human blood." He coats the meat in his own blood, and the homunculus actually eats it. He's been doing it for 3 days now, and the vein-like markings on its body have become more pronounced. He says that the presence of these veins might indicate that the homunculus has a heart. The homunculus starts to spit this white liquid into the tank every few days after feeding. So Korney decides to take a sample and test it. He finds that it has a pH level of 8.3, so slightly alkaline, and it also contains a high mineral content. Korney decides to water one of his plants with this liquid, and it wilts within a day. So his creation has continued to develop natural weapons. It has teeth. It spits acid. It drinks blood. It's developing into something that's actually genuinely dangerous. Korney's next experiment is to feed his homunculus a live fish.
Для этого я приготовил вот эту небольшую аквариумную рыбку. Сейчас я помещу ее к гомункулу и посмотрим, что произойдет. Так. Опа. Что? Как-то она резко вырубилась.
That's weird. As soon as he dropped the fish in, it immediately fainted, and it sank to the bottom of the tank. And it's just sitting there right next to the homunculus.
Поместить рыбку гомункулу в рот. Так. Ай, К сожалению, видеозапись была прервана. Я задел провод питания камеры. Дело в том, что гомункул ощутимо ударил меня током. Теперь уже совершенно понятно, что случилось с рыбкой. Гомункул явно становится опасным.
Somehow, the merged creature, Shoggoth, which had lost Pikachu's electrical ability during the fusion, has regained it. And it seems like it is much stronger than it was before. At this point, Korney has lost control. His homunculus has developed to a point where it can actually hurt him now. "I don't know what I need to do. I'm confused and I cannot make a final decision." So, 20 episodes in, after the blood drinking and the venom and the merging, this is where he gets confused. Truly, we plan and the homunculi laugh. Despite everything, Korney prepares another egg. He's backlit it and has seen that something has began forming inside. He's waiting for it to hatch on its own this time, rather than opening the egg himself. He measures Shoggoth's electrical voltage again, which ranges from 3.3 to even 20 volts, depending on the moment. Someone asks whether ostrich eggs might work. He says fresh ostrich eggs aren't really available, but he's looking into reptile eggs from pet stores. The final lines of episode 21 are, "If there's no interesting changes, then the next video will be about the egg. It seems to me that the homunculus in the egg has become larger. And then nothing. No episode 22, no further uploads. The channel goes completely dark. We don't know if the new egg hatched. We don't know what happened to Shoggoth. The story just ends. Alright, we've made it through all 21 episodes, and a prologue that was honestly a little longer than it needed to be. So, let's talk about what we can and can't say. First of all, biology is difficult to square. Humans have 46 chromosomes, while chickens have 78. The two lineages diverted something like 300 million years ago. Also, egg and sperm cells have species-specific binding proteins, a lock and key mechanism that makes cross-species fertilization virtually impossible. That's nerd shit though, not cool alchemy like we're used to. So, what is in those jars? Honestly, there's a few reasonable possibilities, and I'm not here to tell you which one is true. Option 1 is that Korney is a skilled fabricator. He constructed organic-looking props from gelatin or biological materials that can realistically change and decompose over time. And then he filmed specifically to suggest that they were moving and breathing. Option 2, we can view this as an actual proof of spontaneous generation. He underwent a procedure outlined by Paracelsus in the 15th century to create a creature out of simple household items. He created a true, genuine homunculus. What I can say is this. The series follows a narrative arc that is extremely clean for something claiming to be spontaneous documentation. Creation, failure, learning, character development, escalating stakes, rebellion, and the cycle repeating. That's a story structure. Whether that structure emerged from events or was imposed on them, I can't really tell you. What I can tell you is what the series explores. And that part, I think, is real, regardless of whatever is in the jar. The homunculus story has been told for 500 years, across dozens of cultures. Paracelsus, Frankenstein, the Golem, Shoggoth. The shape of the story is always the same. A creator reaches for something they shouldn't have, and it works. And then they lose control. Korney's series follows that same shape, either because he constructed it that way, or just because that's what happens when you try to create something and it goes wrong. The question this series keeps asking isn't, can you create life? It's, what do you owe the things you make? Korney feeds his creation from his own blood. He nurtures it. He worries about it. He names it, even. But then it shocks him. It hurts him. And he just stands there not knowing what to do. Most creator stories end with them winning, or dying, or learning. But this one ends with him just starting again. Another egg, more hope than sense. I find that more unsettling than any of his creatures. This man had his creation shock him half to death, and he said, I don't know what to do. But then he just goes out and he gets another egg and he tries it again. I respect it, honestly. I think that's why I show people this series. It's gross, sure, but it contains a lot of broader elements that I'm interested in. The weird little creatures, the experiments, the arguably dry and dark humor of it all. The question isn't whether any of this is real. It's whether you look at that last egg and feel a sense of foreboding, or if you feel inspired. Okay guys, that's it from me today. As always, thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Oh, also, if you have any context about Korney or the videos that I missed, especially if you speak Russian, feel free to leave it down in the comments. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks again. Bye.